Yeah, I think we can agree that this is lunacy, but I will tell you where it gets really crazy. When you lose your job because of inconsistency and say to yourself, this isn't bad for me. My account still has money, and it doesn't matter that everyone around me can see the shortening of my life expectancy. So now, I lie unconscious with my tongue in my throat. And my mates laugh and gloat about not yet dancing the G-hop, and all this for what? 2 meals a G? Shit. I can't believe that more and more of us inject intravenously. We fuck about while our bananas pills, strawberries and cream, you're dying inside because you're fruit. And society says that you're below par because you're gay. Is it any wonder when past cases like Smith and Grady, ex-partes, that you can't stand the daily because of sexuality? Like Sia, I had a thick skin, but the world is pulling too much and I've snapped within. The physical pain pales in comparison to the emotional condition. You tried to own it and hold it down. You should have left that shit behind. This is no time for a clown. It's funny to see how unforgiving life is. How do you fit into a world that aspires to be a single boy when you want to be a god? So you spend your day searching for a ceiling for a void that can never be filled by emotional steroids. A heart full of water, drowning in addiction from one body to another. But you don't puff those words these days. You're all about the coke life. Less calories in red eye. I'm not talking extrinsically, I'm talking about those hateful words that lie intrinsically. More specifically, you don't fit the bill of the gay community.
I'm a getaway, take the spots that I have for another day. Wasting words that won't keep me down. On my feet as they hit the ground. Oh, you can take away any pain that I have when I run away. All these sorts of memories. It's my hair, sing the best of me.
And we berate the likes of Russell Tovey for expressing what made him fall into that masculine category. Something expressed all the time in the media and all over Grindr. I almost think it was safe for me in Narnia. So I wrap up like I live in Siberia because you categorize me more coldly and militantly than Russia. Go ahead, raise your eyebrows, but at this point I couldn't give a fuck. You see, our denial has gone far too far. It's funny to see those who are discriminated against on the grounds of sexuality, while others on the grounds of gender identity. The hypocrisy is almost as great as that for my own ethnic community. And don't be surprised that I'm against events like London Pride. At the surface, it's all smiles, and at the base, it's a clear divide. I'm not trying to be snide, but shit like this has no upside. I'm looking for integration, not apartheid. So how about you represent me at Pride 2019? You see, growing up on TV, I never saw my face, and the few times I did, it was in handcuffs and chains. I'm a minority in a minority. I am blue and yellow. I create green. Should it really be an issue that I like the taste of plantain, believe in Jesus Christ, and I love to jam, to breathe? But these questions have created a vacuum of confusion that consumes me. So, what happened to us? And we can't blame it all on those today who both shame and mistrust.
I'm a getaway, take these spots that I have for another day. Wasting words that won't keep me down. On my feet as they hit the ground. Oh, you can take away any pain that I have when I run away. All these sorts of memories. It's my hair, sing the best of me.
What happened when you delve into the world of chemsex. So you pack your pocket and head to the toilet. Pull out a bag, insert a key, powder heat, and you snort it. Maureen, how are you feeling? You good? Cool. So we've got an amazing cohort of beautiful performers for you tonight. And we have some speakers as well who are, how do I put this, experts in their fields. Yes, I love that word, experts. They know, they're living their best lives. So, the first person I want to call up tonight is Jarek, who is going to talk. Yes, he is. He didn't know that was going to happen, but nonetheless, he's got his drink, he's going to live life and come up. And he's going to talk to us about a bit about hate crimes. There you go, baby.
Hi, my name is Jarek. I'm from Poland. I've been living in London for 13 years. When I first came here, mostly because Poland, it's shit to be gay in Poland, you know. It's the more east you go in Europe, the worse it gets. So I came to London and everything seemed to be okay, you know. We've got all the legal rights, we have anti-discrimination, you know, laws, and yet, there's still an LGBT hate crime happening. Last week, I've added to the sad statistics myself. I was beaten up by some homophobic thugs in Vauxhall when I was leaving the bar. And, you know, I thought that I practiced and perfected all the ways to not show that I'm gay. To not appear queer, to, you know, play it safe when on the streets, you know. And, you know, you think that in London you have Pride, you've got all those lovely celebrations, you know. Pride stopped being a protest at some point, started being a carnival, started being a place for fun. And what's happened to me last week made me read up a little bit more about sad statistics which we have regarding LGBT hate crimes. So, according to Stonewall report in 2017, 1 in 5 LGBT people have experienced a hate crime or incident because of their sexual orientation in the last 12 months. 2 in 5 trans people have experienced a hate crime incident because of their gender identity. And 4 in 5 anti-LGBT hate crimes go unreported. And you know, when you read about this, you feel, hold on. There is an official part which says, you know, everyone is happy, everyone is, you know, partying, you know, it's supposed to be lovely and you know, colors of the rainbow and everyone is accepting. But then you go out with your mates on Thursday night in Vauxhall and then some thugs decide to just beat you up because you're gay. So I had 2 choices. I could become a victim, I could just sit at home, hide away. But after that event, I experienced so much love, support, and encouraging messages from lots of people who are here, lots of my friends all over the world, and I felt like I need to speak about it because we're not safe and equal until we're all safe and equal. You know, when I was speaking to my friends, it seemed like each and every of them, at least once in their life, or once in the last 12 months, experienced something. My friend Jurek was beaten up in Vauxhall in August last year. My friend Peter, who lives just up the road, he was on a bus and 5 thugs decided he's too gay and too queer to, you know, to share the same space with them. Another of my friends, Tommy, he's an amazing performer, drag queen. He was wearing his makeup on the bus, and within last few months ago, he was also spat on and called out names. Even according to Metropolitan Police, the amount of hate crime which is reported doubled within the last 12 months. And where am I going with this? I think we're celebrating 50 years of after Stonewall riots, we are celebrating 50 years of Gay Liberation Front, and yet people's minds are taking way longer to change. And I think there's so much more to be done. I'm being Polish. I've experienced a lot of that back home. When I came here, I started a Polish LGBT support group, Polish Rainbow, which I'm kind of, shamelessly promoting with my t-shirt tonight. We're trying to create a safe space for Polish migrants in London, who, even in their own migrant communities, can be excluded and can be treated as a second class. But I think it takes time, it takes a while to change people's minds. So it's important to speak up about it. When you see online abuse of, or homophobic, transphobic comments, just call people out, report it. If you see gay people or, gay, lesbian, trans, queer people treated unfair in your workplace, at your school, at your university, in your local business, call it out. Because if we don't change one person at a time, if we don't speak about it every single day, the law can change. The law can give us, they can give us marriage, they can give us equality laws, but if we don't change it on the basic human level, change will not happen by itself. So I'd like to thank the members of the Gay Liberation Front who are sitting right there. I really think you've done. Thank you so much for starting an amazing movement 50 years ago. But the struggle continues, and the struggle is real. And as I said, we're not equal and safe until we're all equal and safe. Thank you so much.
Well. I think you raised some important points there. As I put it, have we got to a point where we just kind of, did we get to a point where we just accepted that hate crimes and being accosted in any way, shape, or form was just part of being gay? And I've got to say to the people that came before my generation and these ones that are coming up now after my generation, you've done something amazing. And I've got to say the ones that fought for us, which we forgot somewhere in the noughties, and to those that are coming up now, the 19-year-olds and the 20-year-olds coming up now, who are no longer asking to be accepted and just saying this is how you will take us. I think it's very important to acknowledge both sides of that. And to those of you guys who are from my year, what do we do? And also don't be distracted by things like the Jesse Smollett cases and all those things. This stuff still goes on regardless of whatever is being said in the media. And on the last point of one person at a time, I think it's so important in your everyday life. Talk to those people, those ones and twos. So the next person we have up, that was a little bit of a speech. The next person we have up is Alexis Gregory. He's a playwright, performer, producer. His plays include Slap, Safe, Sex Crimes, and Right Act, which is an amazing piece of art. And his work has been performed at the West End, the East End, on Channel 4, in Stratford, The Glory. So, without further ado, I'm going to let you explain Riot Act.
Aren't we so lucky to have Nash as our host? Talent, brains, beauty. How do you make me sick sometimes, Nash? Hi everyone. So, I've got you for about 15 minutes, okay? So I'm going to do a section from my show, Riot Act, which we performed in the summer at the King's Head. We did a West End World AIDS Day charity performance of it, and it's coming back in June as well. It's a verbatim play. I play 3 different characters in it, and I stand on one spot for an hour, and I channel these 3 characters, and we go from the Stonewall riots in 1969 to 2019, and we cover 5 decades of the queer spirit. So I'm going to do the middle section of the show for you now. Are you all ready for it?
Yes!
Good, good. I was born in 1951. I was 67 in September. I'm from Hackney. Do you know where Hackney is?
Yeah.
Good. It was 1970, I would have been 19. I went to the doctor, he said there's nothing wrong with you. I said you can't leave me like this. I went to another doctor, he said I'll send you to the psychiatrist. He said there's nothing wrong with you. And I thought, okay, but you can't leave me like this, because it felt like an illness, a disease. It was absolutely unbelievable. I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of any other gay people. Maybe there was an inference on the telly as to someone being a little bit funny, like That Funny Man. We used to listen to Kenneth Williams on Round the Horn. My brothers used to laugh at him. They thought he was hilarious, but I never put two and two together. I had no understanding or inclination of it whatsoever. It felt like an illness. Really horrendous, and I was isolated. I was coming out of school. I was coming out to myself. It started to make sense, some of the things, some of the isolation. The other boys at school, one boy, a really good mate, said, I can't be your friend anymore. I said, okay, Joe. I think it was probably the parents, because other people know. Joe was a boxer. I wasn't at all like that. I was creative. That was the start of the isolation that goes way back. I thought, God, where do they go? I went to a toilet in Liverpool Street and I thought, God, what do they do? I didn't have a clue. And I stood there and I came out, I was shit scared. And this guy followed me out and he said, do you want to go and I said, well, I don't know, I've never done it before. And he said, well, come with me. So we went round the back of Liverpool Street, because there were all these little alleyways around there. And then after he said, well, did you like that? And I said, yeah, I think I did. Oh, you want to talk about drag? Okay, we'll keep to the point. I remember the first time I saw a man in drag. I went up to Chepstow, this gay pub, and I thought, oh, that's a woman. And then I thought, oh, no, that's a transvestite. Now, that was for sex, specifically. She was dressed up for sex in a gay bar full of gay men, didn't really work for her, never mind. Now, you see, you're talking about drag. Drag, to me, at the time, was what you saw up the Black Cap. The trollettes doing their drag act, lip-syncing and bitching and being evil to each other with some of the misogyny that went on. Now, I wasn't coming from that. My friends were living in Westbourne Grove. This was the 70s, before the property boom, and Notting Hill was a dump. I moved in with them. Well, that was too much, it was a squat. There was 4 of us there, living on the top floor. We had 2 rooms, a shower and a kitchen. Below us was 2 dykes, I think they eventually had a boy. Below them was the Hells Angels, they had coffins and everything, and below them was the prostitute. So that was 138 Westbourne Park Grove. Around the corner from us was Stuart and Betty and John, and a whole slew of queens that lived in a commune. There was what Betty and Stuart were doing, which was much more radical drag. Now, I was 22, going on 23, and I'd never done drag at this point, and to see those queens getting on a bus, a whole gaggle of them being themselves and screaming and shouting and having a laugh and seeing the reaction of other people. Some queens were into wearing lipstick and eyeshadow and keeping their beard, and that was radical, to see a queen with a green beard. So yes, it was drag, but we were stretching it out to androgyny and stuff we could pick up on the street. Betty had a good dress. She put T-strainers all around the bottom. That, to me, was the start of radical drag. And it's repeated itself since, say, Lee Bowery in the 80s onwards. The club kids in America, Michael Alec. I was living in New York in the 90s, and what a revival. The drag, it was androgyny, it was fashion. The RuPaul thing came later. But it's on the ground among us, the people. We're all going around, somebody sees it and puts it on the telly, and every 10 years there's the new one. Now there's people like Johnny Woo and East End drag, where it's okay to have a beard, hairy legs and a pig nose. Oh, You spoke to someone who was at the Stonewall. Oh, the Queens were pissed off that night. I do a monologue from Jimmy Camici from the Hot Peaches. Can you spare any change for a dying Queen? Miss June picks up a chair and swung it, and the whole place started screaming and shouting and yelling, and the Queens were getting their faces scratched, and you know what that means. And the next thing you know, we all wound up in the tomb. They busted up our head. They plain old busted us. And that was the beginning of gay liberation in the village, in New York, in the world. That was written about Marsha P. Johnson. She was there. Gay Lib had come over from America. People coming back from the US saying, we're going to start something new. Being gay in London in the 70s when Gay Lib came was like, oh wow. The first Gay Lib meetings were in All Saints Church, Notting Hill. This was somewhere to go and meet. This was somewhere to go, and we'll talk about it after, honey. This was somewhere to go and meet. The whole place was packed full of queers and dykes and, well, gay women, lesbians. We don't say dykes now, and it was a big furore, a lot of shouting, and you went again and again because you realised there was more than the bars or the toilets or isolation, and you went again and again. And I remember an American guy shouting out, I won't be happy till there's fucking in the streets. So yeah, quite diverse views. It was the beginning of our liberation. What did we talk about in the meetings? Who was dominating? Some queens were very hippie and would sit there doing their knitting. Other queens were like the women. But some women were getting dominated by the men. They'd say, you're nothing but a load of male chauvinist pigs. You're constantly dominating us. We cannot be heard. And there was a big furore and the women were out of there. And that, for me, was the end of Gay Lib, when the women left. For me, Gay Lib wasn't just about gay men. It was about gay men and gay women. Betty got it together and had the idea of doing The Ugly Duckling, thrown out on Normality Farm, and comes across punk. I was the dying swan. People had never seen anything as strong as that, especially when we went to New York in '81. It was polished, it was finished, it was topical. There's something about drag. There's something about the liberation of what drag can be. Now, I wasn't trying to be a female impersonator wearing tits. I mean, I remember doing one character, a secretary. Well, okay, I can look like a secretary, but generally what you were doing was developing your own style. What could you be? A piece of material is not masculine or feminine, so it's how you break it down, it's how you interpret it. If it's the norm, to conform to the uniform. Sometimes we use tunes that were recognisable. We changed the words. It was polished, it was finished, it went punch with something topical. One big thing is that we weren't saying we're gay. We just were gay. We all talked in our own way. I talked then the way I talk now. Even as a kid at 13, 14, people said, you talk funny. The politic was, like I said, being yourself. Why is that such an issue? Why is it a trip if a man cross-dresses? Let's think about what was political. It was political, The Ugly Duckling come out. It's political in what you're doing, two gay guys dancing together, how it contradicts fashion and stereotypes. We went to Holland, Germany and Denmark. With what pennies we had left, we went to New York. We got into the Village Voice. Once, in New York, we had Mick Jagger, Sigourney Weaver and Joel Grey in the audience. Mick Jagger came backstage and I was like, oh, okay.
I want to give the stage to our parents, our teachers, the ones that have paved the way for us, the ones who we are celebrating tonight, the ones, I'm not sure they're going to be ready, but nonetheless, because without them, there's not much we would be doing right now. We would still be fighting for stuff a lot harder than we actually are at the moment. But nonetheless, the first person I'm going to call up is Andrew Lumsden when he's ready. Woo! And he's going to talk a bit about pride. Can we give him a round of applause? Keep it going, my lovers, keep it going. Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing, the clothes don't age. This outfit's from 1972. And it takes a lot of skill to get into. And I can't wear anything underneath it, so there's an invitation. It's got a zip. It was on the first Pride March. So I want to say a little word about pride. There are dear, dear friends from Gay Liberation Front here, as you know, and in a moment I'm going to ask them to come up here. But I thought if I just say a little word about pride, because everybody's so fucked about pride in London. So we have Gay Liberation Front. We go on existing. We may not be what we were quite in 1970 when we started, but we go on, we're still around, and we have a message that Pride in London's committee would like to speak with us, because this year is the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, we all know that, and Gay Liberation starting up just days after the Stonewall riots. People saying we can't let this energy, this emotion be lost. And so the word Gay Liberation Front borrowed mainly from the Algerian Liberation Front, which everybody was very conscious of then. Again and again, just a little about that start for Gay Liberation Front. What kept getting buried was the debt we owed to BAME people, to the black movement. The people who started Gay Liberation Front in London, one was a lesbian called Beverly, and she was at the London School of Economics, and she was running for president of the Student Union in October 1970, so her slogan was Bev the Les for Prez. 1970. She now lives with her wife and her daughter, well, their daughter, in Amsterdam. And Bev went, a Gay Liberation Front person now as then, she went to the island of Lesbos. She tells me it's normally called now the island of Lesbos, with her wife to help 2 years ago with the refugee crisis. The Syrians all coming over in the boats, thousands and thousands. The other two people, besides Bev the Les for Press, were Aubrey Walter, who now lives in Spain with his partner of those days, and also Bob Mellors. And Bob was, he was non-binary before anybody else that I ever met was. And he was murdered in Poland by young men. He'd been getting to know young men, as you would if you were a now middle-aged gay man living in Warsaw, and he got to know several young men, and nobody knows, the police wouldn't investigate. The flat was burgled and he was murdered. This is many years ago now. We're asking that a building at London School of Economics be named in his honour, because that's, Alexis, if I may say so, that's where we started, at the London School of Economics. And then indeed we moved to Notting Hill, where it became amazing. Before I ask friends up, just if I may, just another little word. I mentioned the debt we owe to Black Pride. Now, it goes like this. Bob and Aubrey were in their middle 20s, they were students, they heard there was something called Gay Liberation Front going on in New York. They got their way over there, and while they were in New York, they got an invitation. And the invitation was to the Philadelphia People's Revolutionary Convention, called by the Black Panthers. And the Black Panthers, led by Huey Newton, there were other Black Panther leaders who hated women's liberation and hated gay liberation. But Huey Newton was the one, the leader among the Black Panthers, who said, their cause is our cause. And so delegates were invited from women's liberation and gay liberation to the Philadelphia Convention, People's Revolutionary Convention of September 1970. Bob and Aubrey went. There's a description of Aubrey, who was blonde. He couldn't see a damn thing. He couldn't see his hand in front of his face. Very recent eye surgery has given him sight he's never had in his life before. So he would be sitting there with that semi-unsighted, beautiful sort of face of 24 years old with blonde curls. And they all called him the Angel, because that's how he looked. These two, Bob and Aubrey, came back from the Black Power Revolutionary Convention in Philadelphia, fired up. They had to start it here. So with Bev the Les for Prez, in October 1970, they started leafleting what was then the safe spaces in Earl's Court, semi-safe, just with leaflets saying Gay Liberation Front is here. Come to the London School of Economics, room such and such. A few people trickled in, then a few more people trickled in. Suddenly it was 50, suddenly it was 150, suddenly it was 250. Thousands came through from Italy, from France, from Scotland, from Ireland, from both parts of Ireland. That's those days. Pride in London was started 2 years later in June, July 1972, when this was sown.
30 seconds, is that all right? Just trying to...
About themselves. The years that I was in the commune, which was about 3 years with my partner, were the most revolutionary in my life, and they still influence me. I have in my pocket my camera, which I've taken some photographs from the very first march that took place in London, through central London. It was the Young People's March on the 28th of August 1971, which was campaigning for equal sex rights for young people. When I attended that march, I was illegal, and my partner could have gotten 14 years in prison if we'd been caught out. But that was the very first march that ever took place throughout London on behalf of LGBT people, and it was 2 years, a year before the first Pride March. I think generally GLF was a great revolution. From it sprang the gay switchboard, which I also worked on. At the time, most people had nowhere to go. There were no gay newspapers, there were no celebrities that were well known. If you were gay, you were virtually on your own. And the gay switchboard was like a Samaritan's phone system. People would phone up from all over the country, some of them suicidal, some of them fearing that they'd lose their jobs, some of them rejected by their families, and the gay switchboard gave them support. From that DLF also sprang Gay News and what's the other main paper? I can't remember.
Capital Gay.
Capital Gay, sorry. And Sapo, yeah. Icebreakers, all sorts of organisations. And anybody who is in GLF will tell you that it's still a great part of their lives. Now, bringing this up to date with Pride, I back up everything that Andrew has said. Pride has lost its guts. It's lost any sense of defiance or of pride. It's simply a commercial event now. celebrating smugness on behalf of people who are very comfortable with things being okay as they are. They want to ignore what's happening in Brazil. They want to ignore what's happening in Uganda. In
Venezuela.
Sorry?
Venezuela.
Yeah, Venezuela. And places where being LGBT is a risky, life-threatening situation. And we feel that in the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, it's about time to bring back LGBT pride, LGBT anger, and LGBT joy.
The next person, or the last person from this section, will be Andria. If she's ready, my lovely, she's going to talk for us, and then we'll go for a break.
So, Danny S, are you speaking? You said you were going to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, so come up here and speak after me.
No, I
Why not?
have to do it later.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Okay, so look, it's awful when you can't see and you haven't got your glasses on, and you can't look at your notes because your glasses aren't reading it, and you're that old. Look, what I want to say is this, right? Where does one start? So for me, I got into a very, very passionate relationship with a poppy that adorns the fields of Afghanistan. There's no other way to put this, right? And I think most of you know what I'm talking about. And so my sexual relationships were kind of put, as it were, on the back burner for a long time. I had no idea who I was or what I was. But in my own family of 8, half of us were lesbian, gay or bisexual, which is pretty staggering statistic. It's kind of impressive, I think, yeah. But, in 1975, I shall never ever forget, and so I was grateful to Jrscharles talking earlier about hate crime, the near murder of my brother Nick. And I just want to mention this because I don't actually know, apart from the fact that I loved all my brothers and sisters, and I think I particularly loved actually my lesbian and gay brothers and sisters, I think that this one thing that happened when I was 13 years old, and I can still cry about it today, so that's a long time, by the way, we're talking 40 years. Seriously, he would have died that night had we not been able to get a neighbour to call the cops, okay? Because these 3 men that tried to kill my brother were violent. I can't find the word, I'm trying not to be too nasty. It's terrible being a lady, isn't it? Jesus!
Just say it.
Yeah, they're a fucking bastard! I mean, seriously, and look, the bottom line is that we saved his life, but, it was very, very close. A few months later, I found out that the oldest of that family of brothers was done for murder and he went to prison for life. So, it could have been my brother. As it happens, maybe the worst thing that happened to him in the end was that little known virus that we talk about. And that's actually how I come close to the lesbian and gay community in a very real way, as in politically, right? So in the 80s, I met and fell in love with a guy called John, who probably was, when he first got involved with frontliners. Who knows of frontliners in this room? Anyone? You must have heard of frontliners. Somebody must have done.
Yeah.
Okay, so frontliners was the then People with AIDS Coalition. And John had his life saved by a group of gay men who basically came to the hospital when he was suicidal and nursed him back to some kind of level of you know, because he had also had this very passionate relationship with the poppies that adorn the fields of Afghanistan, but he also got deported from China alone on a plane as a result of that little virus that he had, HIV. So when the nurses had lost hope with him, they thought, you know, we're not going to be able to save this guy, let's phone frontliners. And that's how it went. So they got him to come and represent drug users. And that's how I really come into all of this. And I just want to say something about some history here. We are now at the point, drug users, we're talking about heroin users, cocaine users, MDMA users, etc., etc. I think historically we are now at the point where the gay community we're at 50 years ago, actually, right? Because most of our peers are still criminalised. Most of us cannot be talking about this in such a way that you guys are tonight, right? Couldn't do it. Like, I'm not shooting dope at the moment, and probably if I was, I wouldn't tell you anyway. If I'm honest, I don't want to go to prison, you know. Like, I'm a mother and all the rest of it. So here's the thing, you know, we had to learn. Let me speak for myself. I had to learn from all of you what this means, this thing. I was really glad that Nettie Pollard just earlier mentioned the whole issue of liberation for all, right? Because although I'm not going to stand up here and advocate, obviously, addictive drug use to you, I do not understand why people who are using certain substances arbitrarily designated by the state are suffering such terrible things around the world. And right now, if you look at China, Iran and Russia, you are seeing like thousands and, like hundreds of thousands of young drug injectors in jail as a consequence of bloody stupid legislation. I mean, it's not, you know, it's mean and cruel and it's sadistic. You know, what is that about? And like, as an activist, of course, in NGOs, it's all kind of, oh yes, well, we've got to try and understand. No, we've got to do what you guys did back in the day. We've got to say, hell no, tie ourselves to buildings until the legislation changes. How many more people have to die? Seriously. You know, right now, I got involved with, who knows about Extinction Rebellion in this room? Okay, so I recently got involved with Extinction Rebellion, and I now know why. I've been thinking about this. I'm going to shut up in a minute, but I just want to share this with you. The reason I got involved with Extinction Rebellion is because they are putting their liberties on the line en masse. This very day, 9 of them got arrested for invading the International Petroleum Convention that's happening in London this week, right? 9 of them got arrested. I was at arrestee support until 6 o'clock. And that is what I feel all of those groups that are still being really shut upon from a great height need to start doing. Is actually putting their life, you know, being like the Stansted 15, but also we need to learn the politics. And speaking for myself, right, I had to, you know, read your histories, I had to be with you, support obviously all my family and friends, which of course there were tons and tons. But also, you know, one more thing, because I think there are 2 things that came out of all the speeches that really hit me very hard. One is, you know, if I was summarising all of what's been said tonight, is that we need to fucking well look after each other, okay? Yeah. These are particularly nasty times, right? It doesn't surprise me in the slightest to hear about these tragic cases of more hate crime against gay and lesbian community. I can't even say LGBTQIA. Yeah, but the other thing is that society, it seems that human beings need scapegoats, and that's our problem. That's what's really happening, that things are falling apart, and so whoever it is, you know, the scapegoat du jour. So be aware of that, you know, because it really isn't about whether you're a junkie. I mean, it is and it isn't. The people who are doing it are just bloody ignorant and nasty and full of their own hatred, both of others and themselves. And we know that, and we have to still stand up and fight against it. But we need to be conscious of these things, because we'll build much stronger movements and social justice amongst all of us that way. Thanks for listening.
Androgynous artist, and my God is the epitome of androgyny. He's unapologetically himself. He has not only performed for Alexandra Burke, he has performed for Sunita's launch party at the Amazon HQ. This motherfucker can do shit. He has a voice to boot. So, without further ado, Lamont, where are you, baby? Auntie Maureen, you got the, wow. You can play the track immediately.
I thought you hear me. How are you doing? Same old song, be dragging me down, not good for my body. I change it up, 'cause ain't nothing like having your own idea. My lane's been so, I've never been afraid to switch on, no, not me. And they show me it up for me to reach you, no. I gotta shake the room, baby, you gotta get it. You gotta get up off that red line. Everybody tell you, can't do, just get down on the money. And I guarantee the fall in line. But you won't go. What you want, go there, baby, baby. What you want, go a brand new movement. It started with a conversation cafe. It's all about love, and how we never gonna let quarters get in the way. When you do it, it's never what you say, it's saying what you do. Wanna show me love, keep the conversation going. The room, baby, you gotta get it. I gotta get up off that red line. Yeah, everybody tell you what you can't do. Just get down on the money. I guarantee I'll fall in line. What you want, go? What you want, go? And now, the breakdown.